Hey, my fellow listeners. We know you guys love these creepy stories, yet most of you aren't subscribing. Please hit that sub button and join the family. Hit the bell icon so you never miss another video. You'll also be supporting me. Thank you. It all started with a stack of paper they called the orientation packet, a thin sheaf of pages that felt heavier than any weapon I'd ever carried. My first day at the facility was less about learning the layout and more about memorizing a list of things that made no sense. The man who handed it to me was a senior guard named Miller. His face was a roadmap of tired lines, and his eyes held a flat, polished look like old river stones. He didn't smile. He just pointed to a chair and told me to read until I had every word burned into the back of my skull. The rules were typed in a plain, unassuming font. Each one a small mystery wrapped in a threat. Rule 1. Your shift is from 10 at night until 6 in the morning. You do not under any circumstances acknowledge the 8:15 chime from the PIS system. You will hear it. Everyone hears it, but you pretend you are deaf. Rule 2. If you see a shadow that seems to be cast by nothing, do not shine your light on it. Turn your flashlight off and stand still until it passes. Rule 3. The vending machine in the break room on sub-level 2 will sometimes offer a can of peach slices that has no label. Do not take it. Do not even look at it for too long. If someone else takes it, you are to leave the room immediately and report it to Miller. Do not speak to the person who took the can. Rule 4. During your rounds in the long corridor of Sector 7, you will feel a sudden intense cold. This is normal. Do not quicken your pace. Do not run. Maintain a steady walk and hum a tune, any tune, under your breath until the cold subsides. Rule 5. You are issued a standard sidearm. The ammunition is unusual. It looks like normal 9mm rounds, but they are not. You are never to unload your weapon to inspect the bullets. You are only to use it if a subject has more than one shadow. Aim for the extra shadow, not the person. The list went on. 17 rules in total. Each one more bizarre than the last. It felt like a joke. Some kind of hazing ritual for the new guy. But Miller's demeanor killed that thought before it could fully form. He quizzed me for an hour, his voice a low, relentless drone. And when I finally recited them all back without a mistake, he just nodded and said, "Good. Your life depends on this. Don't be clever. Just be obedient." The first week was a test of nerve. The facility at night was a different world. A labyrinth of concrete and steel filled with a silence so profound it felt like a physical pressure against my eardrums. The air was stale, smelling of ozone and something else. Something metallic and faintly organic, like old blood and electricity. My post was usually the perimeter of the inner research sectors, long, lonely halls lit by the dim, flickering glow of fluorescent lights set too far apart. I heard the 8:15 chime on my first night, a clear, melodic tone that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. It was beautiful and wrong. The sound felt like ice water trickling down my spine. I remembered the rule. I kept my eyes fixed on the wall ahead and didn't react. I saw my first shadow in Sector 4. It was a long, distorted shape that slid across the wall opposite a blank expanse of concrete. There was nothing there to cast it, no person, no piece of equipment, just this dark patch moving with a slow, deliberate purpose. My hand went to my flashlight on instinct, my thumb resting on the switch, but I forced myself to turn it off instead. Plunging that section of the hall into near darkness, I stood there, my heart hammering against my ribs as the shadow flowed past me. It felt like being watched by 1,000 hungry eyes. When it was gone, I turned my light back on and my hands were trembling. The worst was the cold in Sector 7. It wasn't just a drop in temperature. It was a deep, invasive chill that seemed to leach the warmth right out of my bones. It made my teeth want to chatter and my muscles lock up. The first time it happened, I almost broke into a run. But I remembered the rule. I kept my pace, one foot in front of the other, and started humming an old song my dad used to like. I don't even remember what it was, but the sound, feeble as it was, seemed to help. The cold clung to me for what felt like an hour. but my watch told me it was only 3 minutes. When it lifted, I felt exhausted, like I'd just fought a battle I couldn't see. I learned to trust the rules. They were my anchor in a sea of quiet madness. I saw other guards. We rarely spoke. A nod of the head was the most communication we ever shared. Their faces all had that same hollowed-out look that Miller's did. We were all participants in the same silent, bewildering play. I avoided the break room on sub-level 2. Though once I saw a young technician, maybe a new hire like I had been, staring at the vending machine. He pointed at something and turned to me with a confused smile. "Hey, man, you ever seen this?" he asked. But I was already moving, walking right out the door as the rules demanded. I reported it to Miller on the secure line. He just grunted and hung up. I saw that technician a week later. He was being escorted out of the facility by 2 men in crisp suits. His eyes were wide and unfocused, and he was muttering to himself. He didn't look confused anymore. He looked broken. Things changed about 3 months in. It was a Tuesday, I think. The days blur together when you work the night. I was doing my rounds in Sector 7, the place I had come to dread the most. The cold came as it always did. A sudden wave of frigid air that made my breath plume in the dim light. I started humming, forcing my legs to maintain their steady rhythmic pace. But then something different happened. A sound cut through the hum. A whisper. It was so faint I thought I'd imagined it, but it came again. A sibilant rush of words that I couldn't quite make out. It seemed to be coming from the walls themselves. The rule said nothing about whispers. Panic, cold and sharp, lanced through me. My pace faltered for a single second. I broke rhythm. In that instant, the whisper became clear. It was my name. Not my first name, but my last name, the one only on my official records, spoken in a voice that was both familiar and utterly alien. It sounded like my grandfather, who had been dead for 10 years. I froze. The one thing the rules explicitly forbade. The cold intensified, becoming a painful, biting force. The fluorescent light above me flickered and died. Plunging the corridor into absolute blackness, I fumbled for my flashlight, my fingers numb and clumsy. When I finally got it on, the beam was weak, the batteries draining unnaturally fast, and in that dying light, I saw it, a shadow on the wall, but not like the others. This one had a shape, of humanoid shape, and it was cast by nothing. It stood there, motionless, and then it took a step towards me, off the wall, and onto the floor. I broke, I turned, and I ran. I ran like I've never run before, my boots pounding against the concrete, the cold chasing me. The whisper now a chorus of voices all saying my name. I didn't stop until I burst through the door into the main security hub. I collapsed against a console, gasping for air, my uniform soaked with a cold sweat. Miller was there. He didn't look surprised. He just looked disappointed. He walked over, helped me to my feet, and took me to a small, sterile debriefing room. He didn't yell. He just talked in that same tired voice. "You broke rhythm," he said. "It's always the same. You people think the rules are arbitrary. You think there's room for interpretation. There isn't. That thing in Sector 7. It's a listener. It feeds on attention. The humming isn't to comfort you. It's to drown out the frequencies it uses to find you. When you broke rhythm, you let it in. You gave it a name to latch onto, your name." I asked him, my voice shaking, "What happens now?" He looked at me, and for the first time, I saw something like pity in his eyes. "It has your name now." He said, "It's connected. The rules won't protect you as well anymore. You'll start to see things more clearly. And it will see you. They didn't fire me. They never fire anyone. Where would we go? What would we say? They gave me a week of administrative leave. I spent it in my small, quiet apartment, jumping at every noise. I left all the lights on. I slept with the teb blaring. But I couldn't escape the feeling that I was being watched. I'd catch a movement in the corner of my eye, a shifting of shadows that was too quick, too deliberate. One night, I woke up freezing, my breath misting in the warm air of my bedroom, and I saw a dark patch on the wall opposite my bed. It was just a shadow, but it was the wrong shape, and it was in the exact spot where no shadow should be. I knew then that my mistake had followed me home. When I returned to the facility, things were different. The rules still applied, but they felt thinner, less substantial, like a shield made of paper. The 8:15 chime now sounded like it was whispering my name at the end of its tone. The shadow I saw in Sector 4 didn't just pass me by, it paused, and I felt a wave of cold malice roll off of it. The break room vending machine always seemed to have that unlabeled can of peach slices now. Sitting right in the front row, beckoning, I was reassigned. No more Sector 7. Instead, I was given a new post, one that wasn't in the orientation packet. I was to be a door guard, a specific door, deep in the oldest part of the complex, sub-level 5. The elevator ride down was long and the air grew thick and cold. The door was unremarkable. Heavy steel with a single reinforced glass viewport. It looked like a bank vault. My instructions were simple. Sit in the chair, watch the door. Do not look through the viewport for more than 3 seconds at a time. Do not acknowledge any sounds from the other side. My only tool was a small handheld device with a single large red button. If the door opens more than 2 inches, you press the button. Miller told me, don't hesitate. Just press it. He didn't tell me what it did. I didn't ask. So I sat, night after night, in that cold, silent corridor, with nothing but the hum of the ventilation and the weight of that button in my hand. It was boring, terrifyingly boring. And that was the point. The mind wanders. It starts to play tricks. I hear things, soft scratching sounds, a rhythmic tapping. Once, what sounded like someone crying very softly. I followed the rules. I didn't acknowledge them. But it was hard. The temptation to just take a quick, 4-second look through the viewport was a physical itch between my shoulder blades. I fought it. I counted the tiles on the floor. I recited the old rules in my head. I did anything to keep my mind occupied. The breaking point came last night. I was sitting there, fighting off a wave of exhaustion, when I heard a new sound from the other side of the door. It was a voice, a child's voice. It sounded small and scared. It said, "Help me, please, I'm lost." It was the most human sound I'd ever heard in that place. It cut through all my training, all my discipline. It went right to some primal part of my brain that wanted to help. I didn't move. I clenched my fists until my nails dug into my palms. The voice came again, crying now, "Please, it's so dark in here. Just open the door a little. I just want to see the light." My hand was on the device with the button. My heart was a frantic drum in my chest. "Don't do it." I chanted in my head. "It's a trick. It has to be a trick." But the voice was so real, so perfectly pathetic. It called me by my first name, a name no one here knew. How does it know my name? The thought was a sliver of ice in my mind. It knows me because I gave it my name in Sector 7. This was the listener. This was its new game. A surge of anger mixed with my fear. A hot, sharp feeling that cut through the numbing cold of the corridor. I was not going to be tricked. Not again. I would not be the fool it so clearly thought I was. The voice was a masterwork of deception. Every waver, every choked sob was calculated to bypass logic and speak directly to some deep, instinctual part of me that screamed to protect, to help something small and helpless. But beneath the perfection of the act, I could feel its true nature, a cold, predatory intelligence that savored the slow corrosion of my will. It was the same presence I had felt in Sector 7, the same entity that had whispered my name. It had simply found a more effective lure. My resolve hardened not out of bravery, but out of a furious, desperate pride. I would not give it the satisfaction of watching me fall for the same kind of trick twice. I stood up, the metal legs of the chair scraping against the concrete floor with a sound that was too loud in the oppressive silence. The noise seemed to startle the voice on the other side of the door for a fraction of a second. The crying hitched, and in that tiny pause, I felt its attention focus on me with a new, sharp intensity. I walked to the door, each step feeling heavy and final. The air grew colder with every inch I closed between us. The metallic smell was stronger here, mixed with that strange organic scent. Now it was unmistakably the smell of old, dried blood and something sweetly rotten, like forgotten fruit. I leaned close, my forehead nearly touching the cold steel, my breath fogging the reinforced glass of the viewport for a moment before I wiped it clear with a trembling hand. I broke the 3-second rule immediately. I stared. I could not have looked away if I wanted to. On the other side was not a room. It was a vast, dark space. It looked infinite. A void so complete and absolute that it felt less like an absence of light and more like a positive substance. A tangible nothingness that pushed against the edges of the doorframe. It was like a starless night sky if every star had been plucked out and the very concept of light had been erased. And hanging in that darkness were things, shapes I can't describe because human language has no angles or curves for them. They were geometries that hurt my eyes to look at. Not because they were bright or sharp, but because they seemed to violate the fundamental rules of reality. They were like living, shifting equations written in a language of flesh and shadow. They pulsed and writhed, shifting in and out of reality, sometimes appearing solid and terrifyingly present, other times fading into translucent ghosts of themselves. And in the foreground, just on the other side of the door, was a figure. It was made of the same dark, shifting material as the shadows I'd seen in the halls. A substance that seemed to drink the light. But it had coalesced into a rough humanoid form, and it had a face that was a distorted, screaming mockery of my own. It was my face as seen in a funhouse mirror. The proportions were all wrong. The eyes too wide and dark, the mouth stretched into a silent rictus of terror. It was the face I had felt myself making when I ran from Sector 7. It was my fear-given form. It saw me seeing it, and its scream stopped. The strained muscles of its face relaxed with an unnatural fluidity. Its mouth stretched into a wide, impossible smile. A smile that used too many teeth and stretched too far towards its temples. It was a smile of pure, unadulterated triumph. It lifted a long, thin limb. A limb that seemed to be composed of solidified smoke and pointed right at me. The gesture was not accusatory, it was possessive, like a collector pointing at a desired specimen. Then it took a step towards the door. Its movement a gliding, boundless motion that defied the way things should walk. I stumbled back, my boots catching on the floor, and I fell into my chair, the impact jarring my spine. At that moment, the heavy metal of the door began to groan. A deep, resonant sound of protesting metal. A seam of blinding white light appeared at its edge, a light so pure and painful it felt like needles in my eyes. It was opening. It was opening more than 2 inches. My training kicked in. A final, desperate reflex burned into me through weeks of paranoid repetition. I raised the device, the plastic casing feeling flimsy and insignificant in my hand, and I slammed my thumb down on the red button. A deafening alarm blared to life, a klaxon that was less a sound and more a physical assault on the eardrums. Red lights mounted high on the walls began to strobe through the corridor, casting the nightmare scene in a jerky, hellish rhythm. The door shuddered and stopped moving, the groaning metal falling silent. But it didn't close. The 2-inch gap remained, a sliver of that impossible void and a line of agonizing light. From the viewport, now partially obscured by the door's shift, I saw that thing's face still smiling. It wasn't angry, it was pleased. It had won. It had made me break another rule. It had made me look. It had made me react. It had provoked me into pressing the button, which was, I now understood, just another form of interaction, another way of acknowledging its presence. I had played my part perfectly in its game. Miller and a team of others in black tactical gear arrived minutes later, their movements swift and synchronized. They didn't even look at me. I was just part of the scenery, a broken component. They went straight to the door, 2 of them placing strange, disc-like devices against the metal, while others covered them with weapons that looked both familiar and utterly alien. They performed some procedure I couldn't see, their bodies blocking my view. A low hum filled the air, competing with the alarm, and then the alarm cut out. The sudden silence was somehow louder than the noise had been. The door slid shut with a final, heavy thud that echoed down the corridor like a tomb ceiling. When Miller finally turned to me, his face was grim, drained of any emotion except a profound, weary resignation. He just shook his head. "You looked," he said, his voice flat and empty. It was not a question, it was a statement of fact, a diagnosis. I was escorted out of sub-level 5, back to the main level. The two guards flanking me didn't speak. Their grip on my arms was firm but not hostile. It was the grip you use on someone who is already lost. I wasn't fired. Of course, they never fire anyone. Where would we go? What would we say? Who would believe us? And more importantly, who would contain us? I was given a new assignment. A demotion disguised as a lateral move. I now sit in a small, windowless room, maybe 10 feet by 10 feet. The walls are a dull, institutional green, and the only sound is the constant, low whir of a computer fan and the click of my keyboard. My new job is to transcribe audio logs. The logs are filled with static and screams and voices saying things that don't make any sense. Voices pleading in languages that sound like they were never meant for a human throat. Voices chanting in reverse. Voices that whisper mathematical formulas that cause a low throb of pain behind my eyes as I type them. I think they're recordings from the other side of that door. Snippets of that infinite darkness captured on some unforgiving medium. I think this is where they put you when you're too compromised for active duty, but too knowledgeable to let go. This room is my gilded cage, my quiet purgatory. I sit here, typing out the horrors, giving them form in tidy lines of text. And I wait, because I know it's only a matter of time. The listener has my name, it has my face, and now, because I pressed that button, it knows I'm afraid. It can taste my fear like a flavor. I can feel it. Even here, in this sterile, windowless box, there is a cold spot in the room that follows me. A patch of air that is always 10 degrees cooler. It drifts from corner to corner, and when I sit in it, my fingers grow numb on the keys, and there is a whisper in the hum of the computer, a subliminal thread of sound that weaves my name into the monotonous tone. It is patient. It has all the time in the world, and I am its sole focus. It is waiting for me to break one last time, and I know, with a certainty that is colder than the spot on the hair, that I will not disappoint it.